Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining me right now is Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter Matt Apuzzo. Along with Adam Goldman, he wrote a new book called Enemies Within: Inside the NYPD's Secret Spying Unit and Bin Laden's Final Plot Against America. Thanks for being with us today.
John, great to be here.
All right, so the book takes a hard look at the New York Police Department's attempt to build its own version of the CIA, and also how the nation's largest police department failed in its counterterrorism efforts, even after using tactics like designating mosques as criminal enterprises in order to maximize the police's oversight powers. Now, Adam, when this was all uncovered, you guys and the AP a couple of years ago, there was this harsh reaction to these tactics from New York City's religious community. But polling data at the time showed that most New Yorkers were actually in favor of surveilling Muslims and in favor of the NYPD and its commissioner, Ray Kelly. Do you think this book is changing that mindset?
Well, I'm not really sure, but we didn't really set out to change people's minds. I think we're 10, 11, 12 years removed from 9/11, and frankly, I think what you're seeing with the NSA debate down in Washington, I think people are ready for a discussion about the size and intrusiveness of government, and what degree of kind of government surveillance Americans want in their daily life. And wherever the polling data is, I think we're ready for that discussion. The idea of these sort of unchecked government agencies with endless budgets and doing more and more surveillance in America. I think we're just ready to have that kind of discussion.
I'd have to agree with you. A lot of Americans want to hear more about this, and a lot of folks are, torn on, which way this is moving. Kelly also has reacted to the book, though he did so recently, and he said you guys have an axe to grind. Kelly also denied surveilling entire mosques, which you guys point out in the book, and said that the programs that are being used are well within the law. What do you think about Kelly's reaction to the book's release?
Well, I hope he reads the book. I think the idea that it's lawful is kind of a little bit of a red herring. We're not saying it's illegal. This isn't a story about, oh, look, the NYPD is violating the law. This is again, to parallel to the NSA debate that's going on in Washington. This is a book that talks about where we are, what we've made legal, what we've accepted as a society, what we've allowed our government to do on its own people, and that's an important discussion to have. We have a police department now in New York City who was keeping files on what people in the United States thought about George W. Bush's State of the Union address. And the idea was, well, they were, in a Pakistani neighborhood and they were speaking Urdu, but they're watching the State of the Union address and they're talking about, their political views, and that ends up in police files. So the idea of a police department keeping files on what people think about the State of the Union address really goes to the heart of what we want from our government.
Yeah, and that debate, I guess, can be summed up by saying, how do we define the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution in 2013 and beyond? Another fact in the book, you talk about a supporter of Ray Kelly who says that NYPD has foiled at least 14 Islamic terror plots. During the course of your investigation, did you find that number 14 to be remotely accurate, to be substantiated? What did you think about that report specifically?
Well, luckily we didn't have to. Luckily, ProPublica, Justin Elliott, investigative reporter at ProPublica, took a good hard look at the claim that the NYPD has foiled 14 terrorist plot and found that to just be mythology. There have been a number of, and we can use the word plot, some extremely legitimate and serious, like the plot to bomb Times Square, which only failed because he was a bad bomb maker, not because of anything the federal government or the NYPD did. And then there are plots where people are talking aggressively and they're saying anti-American things, and an informant, whether FBI informant or NYPD informant, steps in and the plot sort of comes from that. And was that a plot? Is that not a plot? So I guess I'd refer you back to that story that Justin Elliott wrote for ProPublica that pointed out that those numbers just don't hold up.
Well, we could take a look at that story from ProPublica as well. And then there's another specific story in the book. It talks about Najibullah Zashi and his mosque and the travel agency that he used. Why does this story do such a good job, or why did you find that this story, rather, did such a good job of illustrating the inherent problems with the NYPD's counterterror unit?
Yeah, so Najibullah Zazi was the single greatest al-Qaeda threat to the United States since 9/11. I mean, this is a guy in New York City, radicalized, became anti-American, flew out to Pakistan, got trained by one of Osama bin Laden's top deputies, and comes back to the United States primed to carry out a suicide bombing on the New York City subways. This is exactly what the NYPD Intelligence Division, with the help from the CIA, was established to stop. So it was a great, first of all, it's an amazing success story in the counterterrorism world, but it also allows us to really take a look at, well, what worked and what didn't. And the NYPD, as you say, they had infiltrated Zazi's mosque. They had infiltrated one of his co-conspirators' students groups. They had infiltrated, they had turned one of his imams into a cooperative. They had infiltrated the travel agency. They had monitored the travel agency where he bought his tickets to Pakistan. And at every stage, these programs that were designed to catch terrorists, they failed to catch this guy. And yet they contributed more and more and more files on American citizens who had just no connections to terrorism whatsoever.
Troubling, and this is something that I don't know if it's happened in other places, but there are other law enforcement agencies across the country that have these joint terrorism task forces, and they take certain steps that you would expect the federal government to be taking. And specifically with the NYPD, it was also criticized at the time when this information first started coming out in the early part of 2012. The NYPD was criticized by New Jersey's top FBI officials. What is the relationship today between the FBI and the NYPD counter-intel group, or counterterrorism group, I should say?
The intelligence division is just really one component of the NYPD. For all of the bureaucratic drama between the FBI and the NYPD, the two agencies actually get along really well, and frankly, that relationship is crucial to keeping the city safe. The New York Joint Terrorism Task Force is the largest and certainly the most aggressive task force of its kind in the nation. And that is really NYPD detectives working side by side with FBI agents and DEA agents and the CIA. And they really work hand in glove. It's changed a lot since pre-9/11 when there was a lot more stovepiping. In that way, the intelligence division that the NYPD created is sort of its own track. And they kind of do their own thing. By design, they do their own thing, which in a lot of ways is more of a throwback to the pre-9/11 era of agencies that keep their information in stovepipes. So we really just wanted to pose the question, do people, we know that people don't know what's going on there. There's not a lot of oversight, and they're spending a lot of money. They're monitoring a lot of people, a lot of American citizens, and what are we getting for that? And so that's kind of what our book raises. Did it make us safer?
Yeah, and it does a good job of talking about how this is done on a local level, while a lot of Americans right now are learning about how it's done on a national level as well. And there are some examples of good quality investigatory work done by the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD as well. But there are also in this book a number of kind of head-slapping moments. And for me, the one that stands out the most is a story about the Egyptian man who worked for the NYPD as a confidential informant, was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars only to be exposed by the FBI as a possible double agent for another government. But even aside from that, there are plenty of other examples of bad police work, maybe incompetence or, malfeasance, however you want to describe it. Is this because you think there's a real lack of training by the NYPD on these issues, or lack of resources, human and otherwise? Or do you think an organization like the NYPD is better off just leaving this type of stuff to the feds?
Well, I don't think anybody thinks that the nation's largest police force, the NYPD, can just sort of check out from the counterterrorism mission and sort of leave it to the feds. I think everybody agrees that's a recipe for disaster. We interviewed many men and women from the NYPD and the NYPD Intelligence Division specifically, and they're really good, dedicated people who want to keep the city safe. But the way the programs that have been built here, this idea of putting people in plain clothes and just sort of going and hanging out in cafes and hanging out in mosques and sort of keeping tabs on what's being said and monitoring rhetoric. That's really complicated. when you just think about if you're trying to keep tabs on and understand the differences between Sunni and Shia, between Wahhabism and Salafism, and sort of the nuances of this, it's not law enforcement so much as it is, intelligence gathering and monitoring, people's beliefs. Mayor Michael Bloomberg in New York said, we don't stop to think about religion. Frankly, their documents show that they spend an enormous amount of time, and just an enormous amount of time, thinking about people's religion. I think we try to ask the question of, is this what the NYPD, is this what a municipal police department should be doing, and is it successful and useful?
Yeah, and then, this is all, of course, a huge issue as well now with the book coming out and also with the New York City mayor's race currently going on. We've heard some of the candidates mention that they are in favor of these types of surveillance programs, specifically geared towards people who they believe might be, the ones that need more attention in this situation. Where do you see the NYPD's efforts in counterterrorism going in the future? Under a new mayor, maybe perhaps under a new police commissioner at some point. Do you think this program is sustainable?
Well, it's hard to say. There's a lot of money tied up in it. The White House funds a good deal of this surveillance. It's hard to say what's really going to happen. What's fascinating to us is when you talk about the scope of government and this idea that government only kind of grows in one direction. Here are these programs that were created at millions and millions of dollars. The city council, which approves the budget, never conducted a hearing to figure out what was going on and whether it was working. The Congress, which funds a lot of it, didn't know what was going on. White House, which funds a lot of it, didn't know what was going on. The Department of Homeland Security, which sent millions, if not billions of dollars to the NYPD. They don't even know what the money's used for. They just don't even keep track. They can't even tell you how many dollars they've spent and what it's been used for. So you're talking about just this incredibly large, intrusive government agency that operates with almost no independent outside oversight.
It's true, and I guess you kind of sum it up there really, really well. When you finish the book, that's the overwhelming question you walk away with: is what is going on here? You really, you provide some great examples, but at this point, it's still so much is going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and it's fascinating to hear these accounts and to read the book. It's called "Enemies Within: Inside the NYPD's Secret Spying Unit and Bin Laden's Final Plot Against America." It's available now on Amazon.com and in bookstores. Matt Apuzzo, who wrote the book along with Adam Goldman, investigative reporters with the Associated Press. Thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
It's our pleasure, and thank you for watching Newsmax TV.